Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Looks like we're all on the... Did I miss a message or something that we're just boycotting this side? We're all just boycotting this side. All right. Sorry, Tom, you're stuck back there all by yourself on that side. Yeah, it wasn't Tom, was it? Okay, just checking. Nobody's mad at Tom for anything, are they? Well, good evening. Welcome. Glad you could be here for prayer meeting tonight as we continue through the book of Proverbs, chapter 3. And I'm excited to continue that study. In the book of Isaiah, God says in the beginning of the kind of the hope section of Isaiah, he says, "Go on up to a high mountain, O Zion, herald of good news. Lift up your voice with strength, O Jerusalem, herald of good news. Lift it up, fear not. Say to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, the Lord God comes with might, and his arm rules for him. Behold, his reward is with him, and his recompense before him. He will tend his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs in his arms. He will carry them in his bosom and gently lead those that are with young." Aren't you grateful that even though God has all power, all might, all authority, all rule, that he shepherds you, that he cares for you when, like a little lamb whose leg is broken, he carries you? I'm grateful for that. I need the Lord to carry me like that sometimes, all the time, if I'm honest. And I'm sure you do too. Let's start our prayer meeting tonight by singing hymn number 126 that recognizes God's grace in our life. Let's sing hymn number 126. Let's all stand together as we sing. Lord, as I seek your guidance for the day, I find my thoughts unyielding, confusion crowds my way. But then when I bow to you, the challenges you guide me through, your promises are ever new. I claim them for today. Your will cannot lead me where your grace will not keep me. Your hand will protect me. I rest in your care. Your eyes will watch over me. Your love will forgive me. And when I am faltering, I still will find you there. Amen. Aren't you thankful for that promise of the Lord? You may be seated, Pastor Jim.
Proverbs chapter 3, and if you didn't pick up one of the outlines on the back, they're there for your use. Proverbs chapter 3 again, verses 5 and 6. This makes 3 weeks now that we've been in verses 5 and 6. But I would like to submit to you that that is time well spent.
Amen.
These are two of the most well-known verses in the Bible, and there's a reason for that. Why are these verses so well known? Somebody tell me.
We need them every day.
They're so practical, they're so helpful, we've spent a lot of time on them, and now if Pastor John was doing this, it'd probably take about 3 months. But we'll settle with 3 weeks. Don't tell him I said that.
It's on the recording.
Oh, yeah. Ben, can you erase that part? Okay, I'm going to do a review just to bring us up to speed, and I'm going to try to do that quickly. Remember that these verses are The theme I've been using is decisions that we have to make in life, especially major decisions, some of which change the entire direction of our lives. And so we read here, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him. And in this wonderful, wonderful promise, he will direct thy paths. So we're looking at this theme of trust, especially in the area of decision making. And Roman numeral 1, we saw it is a trust that is entire. A was my dependency, and that is that I must trust in the Lord. I have to trust in something or someone. Everyone does. We trust in things every day. Trust in people pretty much every day. But the first step in obtaining God's guidance is to trust him. If we don't trust him, we're not going to do what he says to do. And God doesn't make it easy. He wants 100% commitment. And if we're not willing to give that, then we're probably not going to trust what he has to say. So that's the very first step in obtaining this wonderful promise that he will direct our paths. And so we ask ourselves questions like this: do I really believe he can help me? Well, yes. Do I really believe he will help me? Sometimes we're not so sure. And finally, do you really believe that his way will be the best? And we'd have to acknowledge that, yes, his way is always the best way. So that was my dependency. B is my devotion. With all your heart, not your head, but your heart. My trust must be a heart trust. It must be with all my heart. And so we must fully believe that he is able to do what needs to be done. He is wise enough to do what is best, and he is loving enough to do it in the best way. Secondly, this trust is a trust that is exclusive. Lean not to thine own understanding. So there's a command to obey. And why are we not to lean on our own understanding? And somebody gave a really good answer when I asked that question. And basically the answer is found in Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And so if we start trusting in ourselves, we're in big trouble. Trusting in our own understanding. And the deal is this: we have to live with decisions that we make, sometimes for a long, long time. And we gave some for instances. One of them was an unwise financial decision, and we might find ourselves in debt for a long, long time because of that. So lean not to your own understanding. God knows things we can't possibly know. We're like the man looking down the path that leads two ways, and we can't see around the corners, but God can. So a command to obey, and then B was a clarification to observe. It does not mean don't develop your own understanding, because a number of verses in the book of Proverbs tell us that we should get understanding. But the point is that we need to acknowledge that even the most understanding person has severe limitations. There is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end there are the ways of death. So mistrust your own perception of what's best. And then we looked last week at Roman numeral 3, a trust that is exhaustive. In all thy ways, acknowledge him. And the Hebrew word simply means know. Proverbs 26:10 says, be still and know that I am God. And so I believe basically what we're being told here is to acknowledge his lordship in every area of our lives, every area of our lives. And then a description of what it means to in all our ways acknowledge him. Own that his is an overruling hand in all our affairs. Take every care to him for counsel. Ask his leave in all that we do. Maintain a constant consciousness of his presence. And then I gave a quote by Charles Bridges. It is nothing less than self-idolatry to conceive that we can carry on even the ordinary matters of the day without his counsel. So a trust that is entire, and a trust that is exclusive, and a trust that is exhaustive is then a trust that is experienced. In the last part of verse 6, and he shall direct thy paths, or literally, he will make straight your paths. He will remove all the obstacles. He will show you the way. I have recently completed an autobiography. It went through one of my daughter's editing processes, and now it's going through a second one. But it's pretty much complete. And I've entitled it, Jesus Led Me All the Way. Because when you get to be my age, you got a whole long way to look back. And at the time when you're making these life-changing decisions, you really don't know what the consequences are going to be. And sometimes you wonder, did I really make the right decision? But then you can look back and you can see how Jesus led me all the way. Matthew Henry said this: "Those who put themselves under a divine guidance shall always have the benefit of it." Think that through. Those who put themselves under a divine guidance shall always have the benefit of it. Does that mean we're never going to make mistakes? No. But we're looking here primarily at these major decisions. And God is, sometimes I think we think God is trying to hide his will. No, he wants us to know his will because he knows it's best for us. And he has our lives planned out. And so he wants to lead us step by step by step. And if we carefully put these major decisions before him, prayerfully seek counsel, Book of Proverbs has a lot to say about that, and multitude of counselors of safety and so on, he will. When will he? Well, when we trust in him with all our heart, when we refuse to lean to our own understanding, when we in all our ways acknowledge him, then he will direct our paths. He will guide your life. He will show you his will. He will enable you to make right decisions. That was a revelation, by the way, A, and then B is a reassurance. You're not left to your own resources. Alexander McLaren said, "Whoever seeks only to go where God sends him will neither be left doubtful whither he should go, nor find his road blocked." Whoever seeks only to go where God sends him will neither be left doubtful whither he should go, nor find his road blocked. So it's a wonderful thing to know that you have prayed things through, you have trusted God to lead, you have acknowledged his lordship over your life, and then can rest assured of his guidance and his direction. I know I mentioned a couple of times how I found it necessary to resign as senior pastor, 3 different churches. But believe me, I prayed about it for years before I finally did, literally years. And I'm so glad, because now when I look back, I don't have to second guess. He will direct your path. And then after you make the decision, he makes it so clear, yes, my child, that's what I wanted you to do. I wonder if there's anybody here that's facing some kind of a major decision in your life. What has your pattern been up to this time in your life? Have you found yourself all too often leaning to your own understanding? Do you find yourself making decisions but failing to pray things through? I've done that a couple of times recently. Not major decisions, but decisions nonetheless. And then I remember, oops, I forgot to pray about this. Maybe you need to start with saving trust. That's number one. Do you really trust the Lord? Okay, we have finally made it through verses 5 and 6. Now back to the booklets, which I hope you brought with you. And we're at the bottom of page 6. And I'll do just a little bit of review here as well. Capital D there, we did start on this 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it's wisdom's advice. Chapter 3, we're entitling The Wholehearted Disciple. And verses 1 through 22 is glad commitment. And then we look at what he should sow. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap, right? So first of all, he must sow obedience. My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. Now, when we see this phrase repeated in the book of Proverbs, it's usually the relationship between man and God. Now here, it's between a man and his son. The man is God's representative in the home. But ultimately, whose law and whose commandments is it that this son is expected to keep? God's, because he is God's representative in the home. And when we're teaching our children, this is not my teaching, this is God's teaching. Now, obviously, there are things like doing dishes, that's not God's teaching, things like that. But life principles, they're not coming from us, and our kids need to know that. They need to know why they believe what they believe, and they need to know why you believe what you believe. And so the obedient son, a friend of mine and a member of our church whose name will go unmentioned, I'm pretty sure I recently heard him say that when he turned 18, his parents moved out. I got a smile anyways. I told him I'd like to hear more about that, but it was a slip of the tongue. My parents were probably tempted to move out. I did instead. I didn't wait till I was 18, though. The relationship between parents, especially for younger children, has to start with mom and dad. And dad is supposed to be the leader in the home. We find that very clearly practiced in the Old Testament and into the New Testament, and it's commanded everywhere that the father is to take the leadership in the home. So obedience. And then we temporarily skip verse 2, and we're looking at things we should sow first, and then we'll look at things that we would reap if we do so that way. Verse 3, let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck, write them up on the table of thine heart. In other words, they are like in chapter 1, verse 9, they shall be an ornament of grace about thy head, chains about thy neck. In other words, it's a very attractive attribute, mercy. Does anybody know what the Lord said about the merciful in the Beatitudes?
They shall see God. They shall see God.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. We reap what we sow. So mercy, one of God's attributes, one that I just marvel over. Somebody give me a description or definition of the word mercy.
Undeserved pardon. Undeserved pardon.
Undeserved pardon, that's a very good description. It's God giving us what what we don't deserve. Undeserved, yes.
Some translations translate it loving kindness. There's another translation too. But I do feel like sometimes that does fall short a little bit of the word mercy.
Mercy is an amazing attribute of God.
Oh, I know the other one is steadfast love.
So we need to emulate God. Most of his attributes are what we call communicable. In other words, we can imitate those. And so we too need to learn to be merciful, giving people forgiveness even if they don't deserve it, even if they shouldn't have it. Learning to be merciful. A good thing to really meditate on and maybe do a word study on and really let it grip your heart. But the second quality there is truth. There is no truth outside of God, and Jesus said in John 8:32, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Free from what? Well, from error, from lies. We are absolutely dependent on God for truth because He's the only source of truth in the spiritual realm. And thank God for this book that He's given us so that we can know truth, and it will set you free when you embrace the truth, when you apply the truth. Stop telling yourself lies, start telling yourself truth, set you free. Then, C, another thing we should sow is dependency. And that's what we spent the last several sessions talking about, verses 5 and the first part of verse 6. D, the next one is humility. I looked the word up, and it can also be translated as we see it here. We don't see the word humility, but we see, be not wise in thine own eyes. And basically what that means is self-evaluation. What does it mean to be wise in your own eyes? Think, man, I'm a pretty cool dude. I'm a pretty smart guy, and I've got my act together. Pride is the number one sin God hates. Why is pride so hateful to God?
I would say that you're lifting yourself up above God.
In a sense, yes, you're taking credit for something that God should get credit for. And that's,
Humble.
excuse me?
And I'm so humbled.
Yeah, Joyce?
Teacher Dustin telling Daniel that's the reason they had pride. That was the biggest thing about making that town bad.
Good example, good illustration. So humility, being not wise in your own eyes. Instead of self-evaluation, choose fear. Be not wise in thine own eyes, fear the Lord. Now remember what Dan said several weeks back, that this is an example of Hebrew poetry. It's not like poetry that we are familiar with in English, but it's expressing the same thing two ways, or maybe it's a dichotomy, or maybe it's opposites. So here, instead of being wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord. Now, why would that be the opposite of being wise in your own eyes? Instead of thinking you're something special, fear God. Why that?
Value God's opinion, not his opinion, but God, you value God's principles above your own.
Amen. Good. Other thoughts there? Yeah.
Well, recognizing who God is, really is, that creates that fear of the Lord, that acknowledgement of.
Okay, so don't elevate yourself, elevate Him. And when you elevate Him, you're going to learn the fear of the Lord. The beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord. That's where you start. If you play Monopoly, it's go. And then the final one, depart from evil. We're just calling that righteousness. And we don't really have to say a whole lot about that. So we're looking here again about what we should sow, and then we're going to run out of time here before too long. We'll get to maybe what you should reap. We'll see. The next thing we should sow is in verse 9, honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. I think we talked about first fruits not too long ago. Can anybody tell me what the biblical principle of first fruits was in the Old Testament? Dan?
Mosaic law required that the very first fruit that appeared on their plants in that agrarian society, they would dedicate as a sacrifice to the Lord as a thanks offering. So they were thanking the Lord for a good crop.
Right.
And they were giving him the first because they were trusting him for what would come after.
And if they did, then his promise was
That he would continue to provide for them.
he would continue to provide for them. The rest of the harvest would be plentiful. It would meet their needs. And the Bible has a lot to say about our giving. Micah says, prove me now herewith. God challenged me from pretty much day one to honor him with my giving. And you know what? You can't outgive God. We'll get to the provisional part of that in verse 10 later on, so I'm going to save that for now. Let's just say for now that over and over and over the Bible talks that in the Old Testament there was like 2.5%, 25% of their income went to some form of giving, tithing. The word tithe means 10%. Some people say, well, that's not what the New Testament teaches. I tend to believe it does. There are a lot of biblical guidelines about that, and that's not really what we're going to explore right now, just to leave it at that. The last thing we are to sow in verse 11 is what we're calling patience. My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. Does that remind you of a couple verses in the book of Hebrews? These are not on the PowerPoint. I added them this afternoon in my own notes. Hebrews 12, 5 and 6. And have you forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children? My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. Dan, what was the morning service worship opening theme?
We sang about the Lord's discipline, his faithfulness to discipline us.
Lord is faithful, and you know, do we always think about it that way?
We don't.
But that is an aspect of his faithfulness. He is faithful to discipline when needed. And the word chastening is used in Hebrews, and it's used here in Proverbs. And so that doesn't mean teaching, it means spanking. And if you don't get chastened by the Lord, guess what? You're not one of his. I think I may have shared with you the night I got saved, the sermon. I only remember two things about the sermon. But the preacher said, if you're saved, you will see one of two things in your life. You will either see change or you will see chastisement. And I looked at my life and there was nothing that even resembled change. I couldn't detect any chastisement either. And I think that's probably what the Lord used to finally draw me to him. Because whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourgeth every child who receiveth. Why does God do that? Because he loves us. Why would you tell a small child, don't touch that hot stove? Because you love him. And why do we chasten that child when he disobeys? Hopefully because we love him, not because we're mad at him. Okay, my time is up. I thought I would get further, but next week, Lord willing, we'll start looking at what we will reap. Any comments, questions before we go on? Okay. I have a few things I'd like to mention for prayer, and I forgot my...